everybody, Evan here, and I'm really excited to bring you the first lecture in my OK Computer lecture series on emerging technology and how that's going to affect the architectural profession and the AEC industries. And if you haven't watched my explainer video on why I'm doing this, click on this thing right up here, that card thing. Click on that first, watch that video, and then come back to this one. You'll understand how this kind of fits into the overall idea behind this thing. The first topic is unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, everywhere from toys to the military. And we talk about how they're ultimately going to impact architecture and the AEC industries. So not only just how we design buildings, but how we design cities, what's going to change about our cities, looking into the future. So I'm really proud to kind of present to you this very first topic. After that, we'll see where this thing goes. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it and talk about drones. I do want this to be conversational, but I also have a lot to go through, so I'm going to jump right into it. The goal here, as I said in my OK Computer kind of intro video, is really to have a discussion about broader technologies and then how those affect what we're doing at HMC and in the profession of architecture. Specifically with drones, by the year 2020, there will be roughly 7 million drones in operation. That's a lot of drones, right? And we'll talk about different types of drones in a minute, but that includes consumer and professional or commercial drones. So what does that mean? It's a huge business. And one of the things that I think is becoming more and more apparent as we start to hear that really annoying sound that you guys heard a minute ago, that's going to become more and more common as far as just background noise. And I think that's one of the issues that we're going to be seeing with these as well. But it's something to be aware of, that this is a huge, huge business, not only for commercial, but for consumer as well. And just to give you guys some kind of statistics to go off, you can see here that the number of personal drones dwarfs the number of commercial drones. So this is the number of drones, and then you also have the dollar value. So commercial drones are worth more, right, because they're expensive, but there's less of them. And then personal drones are catching up quickly to the commercial drone sales. And so this is, again, a little bit of a projection towards next year, but you can see how the numbers are increasing every year. So civilian drones, as they call them, are really, as we might say, taking off. So this is, I'll start where this actually all started, which is with military. As a lot of things do, they start with military contracts and then trickle down to civilians or consumers.
General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper. In March 2005, the USAF awarded a further contract for the system design and development of the MQ-9 Reaper. The MQ-9 has been ordered, with 8 delivered to the USAF. MQ-9 Reaper has an operational ceiling of 50,000 feet, a maximum internal payload of 800 pounds, and external payload exceeding 3,000 pounds. It can carry up to 4 Hellfire 2 anti-armor missiles, 2 laser-guided bombs, and a 500-pound GBU-38 JDAM. The mission can be controlled through line-of-sight data links or through Ku-band satellite links to produce continuous video.
All right, so that was a quick little video just to give you guys a little bit of an intro to the military drones. And you can see here is kind of a chart of scale. So civilian drones, and these are by far not the smallest drones. We'll talk about those in a second, but working their way up into sizes. There's the Reaper. They actually go bigger, the Global Hawk. So these are plane-sized drones, right? But drones really is about being unmanned aerial vehicles, and they're not just plane-shaped. They're also lots of shapes, right? So this is one of those interesting graphics that shows you kind of the scale. You can see down at the bottom in the center there's a person with a tree for scale to give you kind of an idea of how big these things actually get. And really, these aren't the focus of today's talk, but they are something to be aware of that are flying your maybe not so friendly skies out there, doing who knows what. I think Jason was just telling me that there was a NASA drone that came down after a couple years. They don't know what it was doing up there. I mean, I'm sure NASA does, but nobody else. So they do get very tiny as well. So I showed you guys this one here as you came in. It's a small palm-sized drone, but they get even smaller than that. Here's a quadcopter version. So the quadcopter versions are extremely maneuverable, right? That's what this is. You can, as you'll see later in the presentation, there's lots of interesting things going on as far as the maneuverability of these things. These are probably the most common drones that we see. They're out flying over the ocean at the pier. They're at the skate park. They're at the soccer games. They're everywhere. This is kind of the mobile photographer's flight vehicle of choice because they take amazing cinematic images and photos. And these are all by a particular company called DJI, which is a Chinese company, which is really kind of commanding the consumer drone market right now and innovating at a very rapid clip. So it's interesting and fun to watch them. So here's that slide I promised earlier. How much do these things cost the average consumer who just wants to play around with drones? 25 bucks. I think, this one was probably 40 bucks when I bought it a year ago. So prices are going down, safety is going up. Buy them in all the colors, right? So they're and none of these are like camera-based drones. Well, actually, the one on the right is for 70 bucks. And quality and things like that vary as far as the image quality. But super cheap parts, easily replaceable when they break, because they crash, they burn. That's kind of one of the fun things about them. The range is extremely far, even for these really basic ones. I mean, several hundred feet before you would lose any kind of contact with it. And the larger drones will go way farther than that. So, and then just basically beaming an image back to you so that you know where they are. And there's lots of extra safety equipment built into them as well, as far as sensors. And if you do lose contact, they have homing signals. They'll come back. They'll land in a particular place. So there's lots of things like that going on, so you don't lose your potentially multi-$1,000 investment. So predicted value. So this is the value that they're providing to different industries. And this obviously has just happened in the last few years, but you can see the infrastructure, the $45 billion in value is predicted very quickly. And so you can see other different sectors that are being affected by this as well. And in a lot of cases, this means disruption for various industries, right? We don't have to hire a pilot to go do something. We might just be able to send an unmanned drone to do it instead. We don't have to pay for all that fuel. We don't have to pay for all the clearances potentially that come along with flying a large plane that can, take out a house, where these things we're not talking, it's actually safer in a lot of aspects. For instance, you could do something like fly your drone over this erupting volcano because you can't get there any other way. Or if you do in an airplane or a helicopter, you have to be a lot further away. So the resolution at which these things can capture really affords us the ability to want to send these instead of kind of traditional means of doing this, of getting to locations like this where it's just typically hard to get to. Disaster recovery, right? Or surveying what happened during a disaster where roads might be taken out by landslides or floods, just being able to get there and assess the situation in a very safe way. We don't have to actually send people in and send vehicles in. We can just send these unmanned aerial vehicles. But watch out. I just love this image. It's a true story right here. Falcons hate drones. Amazon is obviously testing this kind of thing. They're not the only ones, but package delivery Instead of getting it in what used to be a week and then 2 days and then 1 day and then the same day, it's going to be in the same hour. And just a quick little video here of something that Amazon is working on as far as like how these things would get deployed. This thing just poops them out. Pretty crazy, right? There you can see some larger packages. These drones are going out. They're testing over water, right, so that they don't accidentally fall on anybody. But they're looking to establish the rules and get the clearances to make this kind of thing a reality. And here you can see them kind of moving back toward the blimp. Maybe they go in, maybe they don't. Who knows? All right, so some other kind of applications of drones. This is a company that I became aware of at the AIA conference this last year, and they're called Zipline. And they actually are delivering medical supplies in Rwanda based on these drones. So not all drones are quadcopters, right? Like we saw in the beginning with the military ones. These are designed, built in San Francisco, and then they operate in 2 locations, I think, in Rwanda. And basically they go deliver medical supplies to villages that are extremely difficult to get to and have zero infrastructure. Right. So there are some big benefits to reaching these. And it's just kind of how the flight path works, because what these things do is they fly out. This is all pre-programmed. They circle an area and they drop the package, which makes its way down to the ground. And then they fly back home and land, and they catch it in a big net. They catch that drone because that drone's flying fast. It's not like a quadcopter where you can just land it lightly and have a light touch. So really interesting. And you can kind of see, like, just like your cell phones, they have a coverage map of the areas that they will deliver to. And again, they're delivering like life-saving things to these locations. So pretty interesting and a really inspiring story, actually. So I would encourage you guys to check Zipline out. So other uses, obviously a huge one is surveillance. And this is where we start to have concerns about privacy, right? What's being recorded? When? Do I even know it? It's not going to be long before these things are just completely silent. I'm sure lots of them are already, right? So we heard that annoying buzzing sound, but that's not going to be the case. You're not always going to know that they are there. So police, surveillance, traffic cams, following, the OJ chase will be done by drones. And you can see here, like, this is an image from one, and you can see there's battery levels being tracked, but basically full on GPS positioning. You know exactly where this thing was. I'm sure that it could be used as evidence, right? Because it actually has an image and a location and a date and a timestamp. You can see the position stuff is down here in this lower right-hand corner. So lots of things going on in this image. Even the type of camera, like infrared type stuff, so they can look through things potentially and see what's going on. And then there's always like the ultra scary stuff that is actually, I mean, if you search YouTube, you find some insane stuff, but this is a real thing. So back to some more practical uses. Taking care of agriculture. I mean, depending on how you define taking care of agriculture. They have the ability to go into high voltage power lines where no one else would want to get close to that, or you couldn't fly something close to that. If you needed to see what was wrong in a very high location with high voltage, you could send one of these instead with a skilled pilot. And here's another example. Instead of outside, this is inside at a TED Talk. And you can hear it a little bit, so you can see that they really are getting quieter. And now that people are starting to put on kind of artistic performances, even with drones. And you'll see here, this video is just like a minute long, but it's as the drones fly around, you're choreographing movement, you're choreographing lighting, whether it's on or off, and then how fast they're moving. And these are all very small quadcopter drones in an indoor environment with lots of other stuff probably going on in the room, with radio frequencies and wireless and this. So I don't know what you guys are doing for your Christmas displays this year, but maybe a swarm. Another thing that's going on is sports with drones, and who would have thought, right? But this is these are really crazy fanny packs for your face, and they basically allow you to have a first-person point of view from a drone, and this is a drone racing track. So this is becoming a sporting event, and I can show you a quick little video here that's happening in the UAE where this track is located. Basically, the latest version of this first-person headset looks like it came out of a superhero movie. It's incredible. These things will shoot 120 frames per second to your face from your drone flying at 100 miles an hour in high definition. So, and this is by DJI, the same company that makes the drones. So they're kind of coming at this from all angles. And this is really one of the first consumer-based FPV head-mounted displays.
32 teams of 5 were invited to race and put up free of charge. Dozens more joined them off their own backs. Teams have travelled from every corner of the world, not just for the prize money, but for the track.
We have four pilots that will take off from these start pods. We do have electronic gates that track all the movements of the quads. But we wanted to set these up because, of course, sometimes when you hit them, you'll see some spectacular crashes. The drones will have to keep right on the spine of the track. If they go to the left or the right, they'll be getting penalties. We're trying to promote innovation, creativity, to push people to have aircraft that fly longer, that fly faster, that have more reliability with the motors and the propellers, to push the industry in general. Having it be entertainment is a huge plus. It's just cherry on the top.
Compared to commercial quadcopters built for photography, these drones are much smaller and lighter. Made to race at up to 100 miles an hour, they're custom-made, stripped down for speed, agility and endurance. It's a growing community of tech-loving thrill seekers, young and old, some with jobs, some with kids, some are still in school.
So very interesting, right? Because they're really pushing the industry forward in a much more do-it-yourself kind of a way. They're looking for smaller, lighter, longer lasting, strong, all of the things that we would push in innovation in any category. They're doing, and they're using sports to do it. This is and also by DJI. This is their largest, I believe. Their big drone, and it can carry up to 13 pounds on it, and they're using it for cinematic capture. So car chases, sweeping vistas over, terrain that you just can't get to any other way, and they can fly it and fly it and fly it until they get the shot right without having to pay all the fuel of a helicopter. These things can fly miles away from the operator. And even just how it might affect us on a smaller level is just, here's a screen recording from Instagram. This is actually an account called From Where I Drone, and starting to how it is affecting the imagery that we see as consumers, points of view that we've never seen before. And this is where we'll start to transition the talk into how it affects what we do as architects. When you really start to think about how the way people see how we affect the environment as architects does really start to change how we might perceive our own work and how we design our own work. So lots of landscapes and things like that, lots of points of view that we've never been able to capture before, we're now starting to see with architecture as well. And what it does is it starts to open up, I'll get into this more in a minute, but rooftop. What do you do with the roof? The roof used to be something that nobody saw except for a couple of maintenance dudes, right? So really amazing, beautiful scenery, beautiful landscapes. Like I said, points of view that we've never been able to really see before. And we see a lot of it now. And that's really, I think, it's just the amount of it that is available really is changing how people perceive the world. I just threw this one in here for me because I like to do that kind of thing. But I mean, again, cinema and photography is really taking huge leaps. So what does this have to do with architecture? This is where we really are starting to see what goes on above our buildings. It's another set of eyes that we've never really had to consider before, except maybe in very small ways, or maybe if you knew you were in a flight path and you wanted to put a message on the top of your big building or something like that. Everybody's probably seen that as they've looked out an airplane window. But it really does create kind of a canvas potential on the tops of our buildings. And we're starting to see some very interesting things happen because this is being considered by architects and designers. Even landscape design and the way that it integrates with the building. You can see that new Apple campus up in Cupertino, super clean roof, obviously for performance reasons, but also for aesthetic reasons. So diving a little deeper into how it starts to affect what we do, and this is not architecture, but I mean, it's pretty close, right? It's actually checking the infrastructure, can do measurements. We can actually see, measure area, we can measure distances, we can check for cracking, we can check for leaks, we can do all kinds of interesting things that are typically hard to get to otherwise. Even underwater. So underwater bridge inspections are now happening with drones. So, I mean, there's definitely have architectural impacts here as well. Photovoltaic, they can actually check to see whether cells are dead using infrared cameras. As you can see in the inset picture here, it's actually showing which cells are not performing based on the heat that's coming off of those. This is a messy paint job, but it'll do it. I mean, this is the thing that people are testing. What if you need to paint something that's 4 stories up and you can't get a lift because there's power lines or what? So different takes on the same technology. This is just a picture during construction progress, and the reason I threw this in there is because contractors really have adopted the use of drones because they want to check construction progress against the flight, the day before, the week before, and they'll just continue to fly the same path and watch the progress happen. What's interesting is that I got an email from Drone Deploy, which is a company that I'll show here in a minute, but they basically make software for you to program your drones, marketing to architects to look for change order fraud by using a drone, right? So twist in the story right there. Kind of interesting, right? Because now we can actually fly that same flight path all the time, or the owner could, right? And they can check and make sure that things happened when they said they were going to happen, or that things got installed the way they were supposed to. Here's a map. Basically, we're going to start to talk a little bit about photogrammetry here. And photogrammetry is building geometry from images. And if you fly over a site like this, you can not only get distances by comparing images together. So it basically builds a 3D model from images, compares distances, and automatically makes the contours, the topography. You also get the texture map as well. So you're going to get a digital height map and also a texture map that fits perfectly. The software is even automated to the extent that it can remove the trees so that you can see what's under it, because you can fly under the trees and get the textures there as well. This is Drone Deploy, and this is just a piece of software. It's a website. You can go to it. You can download their software. You can run it on your own DJI. They support many consumer level drones. And basically, you tell it the area that you want to fly in. You can outline your boundary with the red Google Earth pins, And then the software using algorithms will generate a flight path that it will pick a starting point and an ending point, and it will figure out all the angles that it needs to shoot those different various photographs from, and then it'll take that whole model and stitch it back together into a 3D model with textures. And so these are just various examples of that kind of automated flight path, and then you can also see the grid of photographs that it's going to be shooting while it does it. And so this starts to give you an idea of what it's doing with camera positions looking at the site. We've actually used this on a couple of projects at HMC. The Mount Stack master plan, I think, is about 80 acres. They flew it in a few hours and got a full site 3D contour, texture maps, building locations, everything. It's incredible. We also did it on Kennedy High School in LA for the exterior of buildings. So we used point cloud scanning, laser scanning for the interiors of the building, so it's really accurate. And then they use drones on the exterior because laser scanning is really hard to get on the roof and get up, on multi-story buildings. So you fly a drone instead, and the accuracy is not as high, but it's pretty much close enough, especially if you're doing modernization or something like that. So here you start to get an idea of the mesh that they can create and the texture map that's been applied to it, and all of this is automated. So this doesn't have to be done by hand. Here's an example of a scan of a building. And so you can see it's kind of getting the surroundings, it builds a bunch of stuff, and then later on you can just fence off and delete a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily want. But you can get roof pitch, you can get drainage, you can get locations of things. And the cool thing about all this is you can always go back and look at the photographs later too, which are very high resolution, and you can pinpoint things.
So photogrammetry is the science of making measurements from images. The reason this is useful in drones is because drones are able to capture many images from many different angles and from any position we want. But then it's also very important to make sense of these images, because you don't want to go manually go through all the images and review all of them and try to measure things from all of them. But what photogrammetry does is it allows us to make sense of all these images. A photogrammetry software will run through all the images, and it will merge all the images in a model that is a 3D model of the environment. And so basically you do not have to work with individual images anymore, and you can work with a single 3D model that is a virtual copy of your environment, so to speak. If you are planning a construction work, for example, instead of trying to measure everything by hand, you just need to take a flight with a drone, and you measure everything in one single. You take all these images, you combine all these images into a 3D model, and then you can have this 3D model in your office where you can measure everything you want. You can modify things and see how it will work when you build something upon it. And also you can share it with other people. So you can share it with your team, show them how the site looks like. And so it's like having a virtual model of the reality in your office.
So it's fantastic, and we've used it on a couple of projects. I would encourage you guys to speak with either Nancy or myself and the digital practice team if you're interested in using this on a future project, because sometimes it can make or break a schedule. We've actually gone through the process internally to develop a whole RFP for firms to give us bids on this type of work. So we've been really working kind of diligently from some lessons learned on the first couple of projects to make it a lot easier for teams to start to implement this on projects moving forward. But the outcome of it is what's really valuable, because not only do you get the site, the contours, the topo lines, you also get the textures. You can use it for visualization. You can use it for VR. You can use it for a lot of other things beyond just the construction documents. Here's an example of cut and fill. So something, again, that's automated from using photogrammetry and drones to do a large swath of area, is it can actually do cut and fill over time. So you can see how the earth is moving on a site, and you can start to map that even with colors, which is great for infographics, kind of visualization of understanding what's going on your site. If they're moving a lot of earth around, and you can see here, it'll actually do the calculations for you. Just, how big is that mound of earth? It's that many cubic meters. And then even here is inside this piece of software, you can see over there on the left, it's actually telling you what the net cut would be if you were to remove that from the site. And doing that calculation because it's taking real world measurements from the photographs. Another use in agriculture is just, and also for us, is understanding plant life on a site. And so it can actually tell you using infrared photography if plants are thriving or dying based on automatically reading kind of the reflectance of the vegetation. So you can see on the left what previous satellites were able to do and what drones can do as far as a resolution change. So much more fine grained. You can really start to understand what's going on exactly on your site. Because the resolution, we're so much closer, we're just stitching a bunch of images together rather than just taking one big image. And we can start to understand over a larger swath of land what's going on. So you can see here, healthy growth, dead, very poor health, medium health, and then there's no plants. But the imagery, the data tells us a lot. And that's what you guys are going to see through a lot of these OK Computer lectures is what is the data telling us? And it's hard to read it in a spreadsheet, but it's easy to read it like this. And that's really the kinds of things that we're seeing a lot more of is the way that data is visualized. Obviously, kind of the elephant in the room is how are drones going to help with construction?
For example, before aerial package delivery entered our social consciousness, an autonomous fleet of flying machines built a 6-meter tall tower composed of 1,500 bricks in front of a live audience at the Frac Center in France. And several years ago, they started to fly with ropes. By tethering flying machines, they can achieve high speeds and accelerations in very tight spaces. They can also autonomously build tensile structures. Skills learned include how to carry loads, how to cope with disturbances, and in general, how to interact with the physical world.
Pretty incredible, right? This is early days. Here you can see there's no audio on this video, but 2 fixed robots. I'm just basically reading what's on the screen. There's 2 fixed robots, and then the drone is flying the strands between the robots as the robots wind them to create this fiber woven pavilion. So what's really interesting about this is we're starting to mix these different autonomous vehicles to build really interesting structures. I'll have a whole other lecture on robotics, which will go deeper into robotic construction. But I wanted to stick this one in here because it was the first time I had seen them actually use these 2 different things together to create a very interesting pavilion. I don't know how aesthetic it is, but so what happens when we start to see lots and lots of drones in the air? Because we've all seen the numbers. We started off this presentation with the numbers. Is it going to look like this? There's lots of regulations coming out or that have been already put out by the FAA, and basically controlling pilots and licenses and who can fly where and how big of a drone and all that. So very small drones like the one that I brought in here, the little toys, they have no regulations on those. You can play with them in your house and in your yard and stuff. It does start to get tricky once you put cameras on them. And basically there's like a 400-foot rule. And in the UK, there's even stricter laws. And in Canada, they actually recently are really cutting down on the use of drones. And you've probably seen it if you've gone to a national park. You can't fly drones in national parks. They're starting to really have to get into the legislation of this. But this is a kind of an interesting cross-section right here to help understand maybe where things are going and how they're starting to stratify the sky. So low speed, rural, suburban, localized traffic, whether that's small package delivery kind of stuff potentially. And then there's a high speed transit version, which is when we start to get into the air taxis that you will ride in that Uber is developing. And then you get into the no-fly zone, which is airplanes, right? We can't go up into airspace. These things will take a plane down. But you can start to see how this is getting stratified. And really, this is something that I think is going to affect building design in a huge way. Because once you start to do that, these drones can actually be completely autonomous because they can talk to each other and negotiate each other's flight paths and make decisions based off of that. we're actually going to start to see building design change substantially, because you don't have to enter on the ground anymore, right? And you might have package deliveries happening up at another level instead of coming in through the front doors. So this is an example of like a distribution warehouse, and how that could be very different from how they are today. That's where this first image came from. I mean, when you start to think about architecture and what's going to happen with all these drones in the air, it will substantially change building design. So who's thinking about this? Who's planning for this now, for this future that is coming? It's indicative of forward thinking, right? We've got package deliveries happening on the right. We've got air taxis happening on the roof. We've now freed up building facade for other things, right? We're not collecting the solar on the roof anymore. We're collecting it on the skin. I just think there's lots of interesting implications into what architects do and what we do moving forward with this technology. So the final frontiers: unmanned vehicles on the ocean, under the ocean, under the ground. And then I don't know if you guys saw this, but recently Audi even announced this new this thing called the I-Trail. It's AI-Trail, this new concept vehicle. And if you can look up here in the upper right-hand corner, you can kind of see this weird diamond-shaped thing. They actually have drones as headlights for your vehicle. So if you're off-roading in the middle of the night and it's very dramatic, you might need an extra set of eyes out in front of your car. And I just think it's interesting how even vehicle designers are starting to think about this kind of thing. And this is just, it's all being controlled by the vehicle. Like, no, you're not also controlling this while steering. So NASA is also developing drones for space, which are just highly maneuverable. I'll end it there with the presentation. I'd love to open it up if you guys have any Q&A, or if you've thought about this stuff on your own. Where do you think this is taking us? Because I do feel like it does have big implications for us. And that's really something that I want to get across for a lot of these lectures, is how is it going to affect us? And a lot of us think, oh yeah, this is out there in the future. I mean, we didn't have computers in our pockets 10, 12 years ago, and now we all do. Right? We didn't have computers in our ears with our earpods, our AirPods. We didn't have computers on our wrists. And we didn't have these toys growing up either. And now they're toys for kids. And kids are learning how to fly these things. So
it's always a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
You know? There's so many positive things that you've just shown, yet the negative potential impacts are huge.
Yes, agreed.
Displaced workforce.
Displaced workforce, safety,
drug dealers, cartels.
Whoa, he went dark.
So he talked about how they're going to start regulating these different fly zones.
Yeah.
Because just recently in the fires, some of the helicopters had us come off the fire because there were so many drones in the air.
Yep.
So how do you see them starting to regulate that? Is there some kind
Can
of
you regulate common sense?
soft? Yeah. I mean, is there going to be software that will deny it from going certain heights, or will there be some drones only sold to?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a great point, because can they basically, even the fire department does actually have the ability to just destroy drones that are in their way if they need to get them out of the way. And you probably, I don't know how,
Fire hose.
but you've probably even seen it where like there's a video of a guy flying a drone out videoing surfers like Huntington Beach, and a fisherman just got sick of the drone, and he he threw his line out with a weight on it and it wrapped around the drone and he hauled it in because like he didn't like it, right? And so that's part of it too. It's just what is it like to live in this place where anybody can fly whatever they want whenever they want to, and they're not using common sense in that kind of way. I don't know the answer, but
I think DJI has developed in their software no-fly zone. So
some limitations.
So if you are in an area that is a no-fly zone, it won't allow you to launch. So depends on the model.
Yeah. So if it is using like coordinates for that kind of thing, and then maybe there's height limitations for it. But if you're dropping stuff on a fire, you might need to get out of your high zone into a medium zone, and then if there's drones there, what do? You gotta...
Yeah, we tried to get it. Chris Grant was going to bring a drone in for the firm-wide event, and this is a no-fly zone
because we're close to the airport. Yeah.
They're all got an FCC number on them, and so they can trace it down if you're
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Chris. This is one of those things where the technology is ahead of the laws, right? So there is regulation from the FAA. There are highly punitive fines that get assessed to people, particularly in fire zones, because they're trying to set examples of people right now. But the reality is that the technology, like while DJI has geofencing in place to try to limit people from doing dumb things, none of the other drone vendors do. And if you build it yourself, you can basically do whatever you want. The crazy thing is drones could go thousands of feet high. They could fly incredibly far, and we're in an interesting time where the law, the social consciousness on what's right is just playing catch up.
Yeah, and they still design cars that break the speed limit too. So it's not like there definitely is like the operator responsibility part of that, which is seemingly waning for a lot of people.
Aaron. So yeah, I recently I'm in the process of doing a subdivision on an acre parcel, and trying to get county to understand the logistics of the parcel. And what excuse me is basically decades of living on it and understanding the topography and how water flows and all that. No matter how you try to explain it, it didn't matter, right? So finally, yeah, you need data. So what I did is I did basically the Matterport across the property. Because they always want like a still picture, but you really can't communicate with a still picture. And so at least with the Matterport, even though this was not drone based, but some of the technologies kind of overlap.
Yeah.
I was able to get them immersed into basically this sort of three-dimensional environment. And then we could talk about the logistics, and it helped accelerate as much as you could use that word with the county.
Story. Yeah.
It tells a story.
Yeah.
And they were able to then we were able to make decisions. Right, and not have to wade through these like lengthy bureaucratic processes. But so that was the positive.
Yeah.
The negative was, oh hey, when did you add that part of the house onto your property, or where did that carport come from? And then all of a sudden it opened up this other like whole logistics of having to like legitimize other aspects of the property. So definitely pros and cons, and I could see where you have to be really selective because even if you take like take DSA, for instance, and they say, okay, we're going to go fly a drone over a campus to make sure that every building has a DSA closeout number. And all of a sudden it's like, where did that greenhouse come from? Why are there kids in it? And then it could just kind of unravel in a way that
forces an honesty.
Yeah, it forces an honesty.
It's data-based.
But at the same time, it forces like an issue of privacy, right?
Yeah.
And so that one graph where you showed the uptake of sales and so forth, it'd be great to see that same chart with the uptake in BB guns.
Yeah.
Because I can totally see it, because there are drones flying even over, out, in the county that I'm in. I see them all the time, and I'm absolutely certain they're county drones basically trying to do like property assessments.
Yeah, takeoffs.
And just recently I got another thing in the mail saying, if your property had a certain item on it that was, predated and so forth, then you would have to get your taxes reassessed based on that element. And I think the only way they've been able to do that is through drones, because they're not sending somebody out to every single property in the county to determine the assessment. So it's kind of tricky. Like I enjoy the technology of it, but from other aspects, it can prove to be kind of costly at a consumer level that hasn't been seen yet.
I think the regulation sides are transitionary. As the technology increases the regulations or control and how that happens, you know, how they can be applied and used has to change as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the company DJI that we've referenced several times just came out with a drone this last week that basically is 1 gram less than the weight limit for some pilot's license. Chris might know more, but basically they're creating a drone that just skirts under that existing rule, so that, you know, it's be out in the market. Yeah, be classified under a different class.
But the site assessment abilities of this is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So like
This is
I
a
said,
start.
like I said, the Mount Sac project was 80 acres, and they did it in a day. Let's just call it a day. It's probably half of a day, actually. But they'll fly it, they build the model, they provide the files that are fully digital to do. And it basically I took the potential of our master planning at least to the next level, because Mount Sac is on a hill. And you have to start to work in cross slopes, and you have to work in all of the different elevation changes between the buildings and things like that. So when you're planning the future of a campus, accessibility is an issue. And so that really became a driver in that way. And it happened in a fraction of what it used to take to do it. And it also gives us the ability to now provide 3D immersive graphics in a master plan, right? It traditionally just used to be a site plan. So there are definite benefits, but also, you know, potentials for future thinking and how we could apply it, if we want to apply it. How far do we go? What do we hold back? There's lots of decisions to be made there, but be very aware that all of this stuff is at this information is at everybody's fingertips. And so just because you might want to hold it back and not make a client aware of something, they probably already know about it, and they might ask you for it. And I'd rather us be driving that conversation than be reacting to it. So I would also encourage people to be proactive about that sort of thing.
I mean, I have a comment on things for architecture. What we need to start thinking about for our clients is potentially like civic projects and security, right? So what's, you know, you mentioned kind of drug dealers and BB guns, but I mean, looking on the dark side, what are the criminals going to be looking to do? Terroristic, you know, threats. What are those going to do to our clients? You know, protect those. So how do we protect HVAC units and, you know, rooftop units? And now, you know, we had blast zones before because we were worried about bands driving up into us.
That's where the change in the started.
Yeah. Now they can just drop a payload on top of a roof and blow it up.
An interesting construction application.
Thanks, Tom.
Sorry, that we were indirectly involved with. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Was at the Cal Poly project. SUNT was using it on a regular basis
to show construction progress.
Scanning, well, not just the progress, but it ended up being such a useful tool because cast in place concrete, all the rebar was identified. And as we had to go back and drill holes that weren't there because people forgot them, it helped in scanning and locating the primary chords and the rebar as it's been placed. Made it much easier. They were still radio frequencying the slabs to make sure that they're, you know, within tolerance, but it was really an amazing.
Are there vendors that we currently work with to provide these services? Like, do we have like a list of people?
We do. Several to work with. There's several that do not only drones, but also interior scanning via, you know, Leica or Faro laser scanners on the inside of buildings that are incredibly accurate. Never go to a site and measure with a tape again. But the drones for the exterior stuff, the large coverage areas, is really. There are many vendors. We've worked with a few so far. Even civil engineers really getting into this because they're offering it as additional services. So,
well, it's a bit of a threat to them too.
Well, unless they take advantage of it, right? If you get in early, you take advantage of it. You start offering lots of interesting services. Yeah.
Do you see this as us getting the fleet of drones and offering this as a service to our clients?
Hey, Chris, are you still there?
I am.
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
So, I mean, it's certain. You know, the tech is constantly changing. There was, you know, a couple years ago we had looked at it, and there was some questions from a kind of risk management standpoint and a discoverability for like if we found something and on a project, would that have sort of create problems in future litigation? But that was a couple years ago, right? So it could certainly be looked into again. At the time, it was kind of tabled and maybe a little more new than people were comfortable with. But you know, this like Evan's been showing, this tech is being used in a lot of different ways now than it wasn't then. So certainly could be something that gets looked into again.
Yeah, and it really, a lot of times architects stray away from risk, like give more and more services away. I think this is one of those things that you just make that decision on, or you constantly reevaluate and see what kind of risks you're willing to take on. And like Brian mentioned, either take advantage of it or risk losing that opportunity to somebody else who will take the risk. And that we see that with a lot of contractors. They're doing it themselves on their own projects and then offering that as a service or offering that as a byproduct of their services as an added value. So
yeah, because we take the risk of their data that we get from them. So this way we can do it ourselves.
Right. Yeah. You can use it for double checking work for sure. In that way, you can duplicate it, or you could work together. You could form a partnership. There's lots of ways you can think about approaching that. Cool. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I really appreciate everybody showing up. Oh, I have one more slide. You ready? Terrifying. What is that?
Which is cool.
It goes up building.
Oh my God. That's
all right. That's just on loop.